Okay, today we pause for a moment. Just a quiet breath between endless notifications, unfinished emails, and the soft hum of a world that never stops. Every day, you wake up to noise, the kind that seeps into your thoughts, disguised as productivity, perfection, and the need to stay connected. Yet beneath all that motion, something deeper stirs. A quiet ache, a whisper of anxiety, the sense that peace keeps slipping just beyond reach. Welcome to Stoic Dhamma, a space where ancient wisdom meets the modern mind. Here we explore the philosophy of Stoicism, not as a distant idea, but as a living guide for self-mastery, resilience, and calm. In this episode, Best Daily Stoic Practices to Overcome Anxiety and Stress, we'll journey through timeless teachings that show how peace is not found by escaping the storm, but by standing still within it. Through the lens of Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus, we'll rediscover the art of living, clear, steady, and free. In every age, humanity has searched for a compass, something steady enough to guide us through chaos. For the ancients, that compass was the philosophy of Stoicism, a way of living that begins not in temples or palaces, but within the quiet space of the mind. Stoicism does not promise the absence of pain, nor the escape from the world's noise. Instead, it offers a way to walk through it, with clarity, courage, and calm. Imagine standing in the middle of a storm. The wind howls, the world feels uncertain, and yet somewhere inside you, there's a small flame that doesn't flicker. That flame is what the Stoics called inner strength, the power to remain centered even when the external world loses balance. In our modern age, this idea feels almost radical. We are surrounded by constant change, social media trends that vanish overnight, news cycles that thrive on fear, ambitions that demand more than we can give. We've learned to chase everything outside of ourselves: approval, control, validation, while neglecting the one thing that truly determines peace, the state of our own mind. Stoicism reminds us that serenity doesn't come from changing the world, but from changing the way we relate to it. When Marcus Aurelius wrote his Meditations over 2,000 years ago, he wasn't preaching from a throne. He was writing to himself, whispering reminders in the middle of battlefields and sleepless nights. He faced the same storm we face: uncertainty, loss, fear of the future, and yet he found stillness through reflection, discipline, and acceptance. From here, we begin to see Stoicism not as an abstract philosophy, but as a living practice. It asks one simple but profound question: what truly lies within your control? Epictetus, born into slavery, once said that while we cannot control what happens to us, we can control how we respond. That single shift, from reaction to reflection, becomes the foundation of freedom. When we stop trying to master the external world and instead master our internal one, anxiety loses its grip. Now imagine your own life for a moment. A difficult conversation, an unexpected loss, or the restless pressure to be more. These moments are not obstacles. They are the training grounds of the soul. Every challenge becomes an invitation to practice equanimity, to see things not as good or bad, but simply as they are. Stoicism teaches that peace is not passive. It's not withdrawal or indifference. It is the quiet strength that comes from self-awareness, from the ability to see our thoughts clearly without being enslaved by them. The Stoics believed that wisdom begins when we can distinguish what belongs to us and what does not. Think of it like a river. You cannot control its current, but you can learn to navigate it. The current is life, unpredictable, sometimes harsh, always moving. Your task is to steer your inner vessel with grace, not to curse the water for flowing as it does. From here, we turn to the deeper question: why has this ancient philosophy endured while empires have fallen, technologies have evolved, and beliefs have shifted? The answer lies in its simplicity. Stoicism speaks to something timeless: the universal struggle between the chaos outside and the calm within. Every civilization has its storms, wars, economic crises, moral confusion. Yet Stoicism endures because it addresses the one element that never changes: human nature. It teaches us how to think, how to perceive, and how to live with integrity even when the world seems to lose its way. Today, when anxiety and stress have become the defining illnesses of our time, Stoicism feels less like a relic and more like a remedy. It reminds us that peace is not a gift from the world. It is a discipline of the mind. But there's another layer here, one that reaches beyond philosophy into the realm of self-discovery. To live stoically is to practice mindfulness before the word existed. It's to pause before reacting, to see the impermanence in all things, and to anchor yourself in what cannot be taken, your reason, your virtue, your capacity for choice. If you look closely, this mirrors the wisdom found in the East, in the teachings of the Buddha, or the meditative insights of Hindu philosophy. Both paths speak of detachment, awareness, and the end of suffering through understanding the self. Though born from different cultures, they converge on the same truth, that inner peace is a skill, not a coincidence. Now imagine this. Every morning before you open your phone, before you check your calendar, you take a moment to breathe. You remind yourself of what truly matters. You accept that some things will go wrong, that people will disappoint you, that plans will change, and yet you decide consciously to respond with calm. That single choice transforms your day, and over time, your life. This is the essence of Stoicism. Not a denial of emotion, but mastery over its storms. It's about learning to carry serenity within you, even when the world does not cooperate. So perhaps the question is not whether Stoicism still matters today, but whether we can afford to live without it. When our attention is scattered and our hearts are restless, Stoicism becomes a mirror reminding us that everything we seek externally, peace, meaning, freedom, already resides within. In a world obsessed with doing, Stoicism invites us to being. In a time defined by noise, it calls us to silence. It's not an escape from reality, but a deeper immersion into it, one guided by clarity and acceptance instead of fear. As we move forward, remember this: anxiety grows in the space between what we can and cannot control. True wisdom begins when we bridge that gap, return to the present, and reclaim our inner power. Let us now travel back to ancient Greece and Rome, where Stoic philosophy first emerged, and thinkers like Zeno, Cleanthes, and Marcus Aurelius built a timeless foundation for living. To understand Stoic philosophy, we must travel back to an age long before our own, to the bustling streets of ancient Athens and later, to the heart of Rome. Picture a world of marble temples, open-air forums, and men draped in simple robes walking under the Mediterranean sun, discussing the nature of the universe and the soul. It was a time of empire and uncertainty, when wars reshaped borders and the meaning of virtue seemed to shift with every ruler. Out of this turbulence, a new kind of wisdom began to take shape, not one that promised wealth or glory, but something far more profound: freedom through discipline. It was here, around 300 BCE, that a man named Zeno of Citium began teaching beneath the painted colonnade, known as the Stoa Poikile. From that simple porch came the word Stoicism. Zeno's life had been marked by shipwreck, loss, and reinvention, and it was through these trials that he discovered the essence of resilience. He taught that virtue, not pleasure or power, was the highest good, that the only true wealth was found in the mastery of the mind. His student, Cleanthes, carried this torch forward with devotion and strength. Cleanthes wrote of the cosmos as a living, divine order, an unfolding pattern of reason that humans could align with through understanding. For him, the Stoic path was not an escape from fate, but a harmony with it. To resist life's natural flow was to suffer. To move with it was to find peace. From here, Stoicism spread through generations of thinkers: Chrysippus, who built its logical foundations; Panaetius, who brought it to Rome; and eventually Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius, who would transform it into a practical guide for living. These names, though separated by centuries, shared one unbreakable thread: the conviction that true power lies not in what happens to us, but in how we interpret it. Imagine Epictetus, a slave in the Roman Empire, confined to the will of his master, yet inwardly freer than most emperors. For him, the chains on his body could not touch the freedom of his mind. He taught that life is divided into two realms, what we can control and what we cannot. Peace, he said, belongs only to those who understand the difference. This simple insight would echo through history, influencing not just philosophers but psychologists, leaders, and ordinary people seeking strength in times of chaos. Then, centuries later, we find Marcus Aurelius, seated not in a classroom but on a battlefield. The emperor of Rome, burdened by war, disease, and betrayal, wrote his meditations by candlelight, not for the public, but for himself. These writings were his private prayers, his effort to remain kind in the face of cruelty, steady amid despair. His words still resonate, that we must be like the rock against which the waves break, yet it stands firm. Between Epictetus and Marcus lies the full range of human experience, from slavery to sovereignty. Yet both reached the same conclusion. The outer world may belong to fate, but the inner world belongs to us. Stoicism, in this sense, is not a philosophy for the privileged. It is a philosophy for the human condition itself. Now imagine the historical backdrop of these teachings, a world without certainty, where death, exile, and loss were daily realities. Stoicism rose as both medicine and mirror. It did not seek to erase suffering but to transform it into wisdom. Each Stoic understood that the path to peace was not through avoiding pain, but through understanding it, learning to see every hardship as material for growth. This perspective bridged philosophy and psychology long before modern science could name it. In today's terms, we might call it cognitive reframing, the art of perceiving events in a way that empowers rather than weakens us. Modern psychologists like Albert Ellis and Aaron Beck, founders of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, openly acknowledged Stoicism's influence. They discovered that by changing our thoughts, we change our emotions, a truth the Stoics had lived by centuries before. But Stoicism was not merely intellectual. It was spiritual in its depth, practical in its form. Its roots intertwine with ideas found in Eastern traditions, the detachment of Buddhist mindfulness, the acceptance of karma in Hindu philosophy, the harmony with nature in Taoism. All speak of surrendering control over what cannot be changed and cultivating peace in the present. From this vantage point, Stoicism begins to feel less like a Western philosophy and more like a universal language of the soul. Whether you were a Roman emperor or a wandering monk, the principle was the same. Peace is internal, not circumstantial. Now imagine walking through the ruins of the ancient forum, feeling the faint echo of those who once gathered there. You can almost hear their voices, not as relics of history, but as living reminders that wisdom is timeless. The world they knew has vanished, but their insights remain untouched. They remind us that the human heart has always wrestled with the same storms: fear, loss, ambition, uncertainty, and that Stoicism endures because it speaks directly to those storms. From here, the message becomes clear. To live stoically is to live awake. It is to see the unfolding of life without judgment, to remain gentle in strength, calm in motion, steady in impermanence. It is to remember, as Seneca once wrote, that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. As we look around our own world, a world of information overload, constant comparison, and invisible anxiety, the wisdom of the Stoics feels almost prophetic. They remind us that no matter how far technology advances, the human mind still requires training. Peace remains a practice, not a product. As we carry this legacy forward, Stoicism reveals itself as a living philosophy, bridging ancient wisdom and modern life. It asks, what does true freedom mean? And can we find the same serenity Marcus and Epictetus embodied amid chaos? Philosophy, when left on paper, is just ink and memory. Its true worth emerges only when it flows into the rhythm of daily life, into how we speak, act, and think when no one is watching. Stoicism, above all, is not meant to be admired from afar. It is meant to be lived. To live stoically is not to suppress emotion or to wear a mask of indifference. It is to meet emotion with clarity, to observe anger, fear, or sadness as passing guests, not as rulers of your soul. The Stoic does not run from the storm within. Instead, they study its movement until they learn how to stand calmly at its center. From here, we step into the heart of practice. The ancient Stoics were not armchair philosophers. They were warriors of thought, testing their ideas against the friction of everyday life. And in the same way, we too can bring their wisdom into our modern routines, where the true test of philosophy unfolds, not in temples or books, but in the small, invisible moments that shape who we become. Imagine your workday, the endless emails, the sudden deadlines, the quiet tension that builds beneath the surface. A Stoic approach begins with awareness. What here is within my control? You cannot control how others respond, nor the pace of the world, but you can control the quality of your attention, the steadiness of your effort, and the tone of your response. When you feel anxiety rising before a meeting or a project, pause. Take a single, deliberate breath. Ask yourself, is this within my control? If the answer is no, release it. Redirect your focus to what can be done, calmly and effectively. In that small act of surrender, you reclaim your freedom. Stoicism teaches that true power lies not in domination, but in discipline. Now, think of your relationships, the unspoken expectations, the moments of misunderstanding, the pull between love and ego. Stoic wisdom invites you to listen more deeply, not merely to the words spoken, but to the intentions behind them. Instead of reacting to offense or frustration, observe it. There is always a breath between stimulus and response, and within that breath lies choice. When someone speaks harshly, you can let their words pass through you, like wind through trees. You need not absorb their chaos. This is not cold detachment. It is compassion guided by reason. It is the realization that everyone is fighting their own invisible battle, and that peace begins where judgment ends. Inwardly, the Stoic practice becomes even more profound. It calls you to cultivate silence, not the absence of sound, but the presence of awareness. Each morning, before the rush of the world begins, take a few moments to sit in stillness. Feel your breath. Acknowledge your thoughts without resistance. This simple ritual is not mere meditation. It is an act of alignment. Some choose to write a Stoic journal, a practice inspired by Marcus Aurelius himself. You might begin by noting one principle for the day, something like, I will focus on what I can control, or I will act with patience. These words are not affirmations, they are commitments. As the day unfolds, you live them quietly, steadily, until philosophy becomes instinct. At night, another practice awaits. Reflection. Before sleep, look back gently upon the day. Ask yourself, where did I act in accordance with my values? Where did I lose balance? What can I learn from this? Seneca once wrote that a day unexamined is a day wasted. This ritual of reflection transforms mistakes into teachers and experiences into wisdom. Through repetition, Stoic mindfulness begins to rewire perception. You start to notice how often worry feeds on illusion, how much of your stress comes from resisting what simply is. You begin to live less reactively and more deliberately. Even small frustrations, a delayed train, an impatient colleague, an unexpected obstacle, become opportunities to practice calm. Over time, this discipline deepens into peace. Not the fragile peace that depends on perfect circumstances, but a resilient peace, the kind that survives disappointment and still chooses gratitude. The Stoic heart does not seek a life without pain. It seeks the wisdom to use pain as a teacher. Now, imagine carrying this practice beyond yourself. You become an anchor in the storms of others, a quiet presence that radiates steadiness. This is how philosophy spreads, not through lectures or debates, but through example. A calm person calms others. A rational mind reminds others of their own strength. And so, Stoicism becomes less about thinking and more about being. It becomes visible in how you pause before speaking, how you hold patience in conflict, how you choose restraint instead of reaction. These small acts, unseen by most, are the silent victories of the Stoic path. In a world addicted to speed, Stoic practice is an act of rebellion. It asks you to slow down, to breathe, to observe. It reminds you that peace is not found by controlling time or people or outcomes, but by mastering the space within your own mind. The modern world offers countless tools for productivity, but few for tranquility. Stoicism bridges that gap. It gives structure to introspection and turns mindfulness into moral strength. It teaches that living well is not about avoiding difficulty, but about approaching it with virtue, reason, and grace. Each day offers countless chances to practice. Every morning is a blank tablet, every challenge, a new line in your book of character. And as you continue, something subtle begins to shift. Anxiety no longer dictates your pace, and stress becomes less of an enemy, more of a signal calling you back to awareness. This is the subtle transformation Stoicism offers, a return to your true self. Through consistent reflection, mindful compassion, and mastery over your thoughts, you uncover the ancient ideal of ataraxia, a profound, unshakable serenity that remains steady, even amid life's turbulence. Across time, the language changes, the world transforms, but the essence of wisdom remains the same. From the marble halls of ancient Rome to the therapy rooms of the modern age, the human quest for peace has never ceased. What Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and Epictetus discovered through introspection and reason, psychologists like Viktor Frankl and Carl Jung later echoed through science and existential thought. They all arrived at a single, unshakable truth, that the mind, when disciplined, can turn even suffering into strength. Seneca observed that we often suffer more in our imagination than in reality, a truth that resonates strongly today. Much of our anxiety does not come from what actually happens, but from the narratives we construct around events, fears, assumptions, and projections that grow beyond control. Marcus Aurelius, in the quiet of his war tent, echoed this insight, reminding himself that true power lies within the mind, not in external circumstances. By recognizing this, we discover that our strength is not dictated by events, but by how we choose to perceive, interpret, and respond to them. Centuries later, Viktor Frankl, psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, encountered the same Stoic truth amid unimaginable suffering. In Man's Search for Meaning, he showed that even when all external freedoms are stripped away, safety, comfort, dignity, one freedom remains, the freedom to choose one's attitude. Between life's events and our responses lies a small but vital space, a place where we can pause, reflect, and decide how to act. Within that space resides the power to transform hardship into growth, pain into insight, and despair into a pathway toward resilience and inner freedom. That space is the beating heart of Stoicism. It is where choice is born, where reaction becomes reflection, where chaos meets consciousness. The ancients called it logos, the divine reason within every human being. Modern psychology might call it awareness or cognitive distance. But whatever the name, its message is eternal. Peace is not found by controlling the world, but by mastering the self. When Marcus Aurelius led his armies through plague, war, and betrayal, he wrote nightly to himself, not to command others, but to command his own thoughts. When Frankl walked among the suffering of concentration camps, he turned inward and found purpose. When Carl Jung faced the depths of his own psyche, he too realized that healing begins with integration, not denial. From emperors to psychologists, from philosophers to survivors, the lesson converges. Suffering is not the enemy, it is a teacher. The Stoics never promised an easy life, only a meaningful one. They taught that adversity refines character, that pain can awaken perspective, and that silence, the deep, attentive kind, is where transformation begins. Now look at our own era. The noise is louder than ever. Notifications, opinions, endless news, algorithms that chase attention but rarely nourish it. Amid this chaos, the Stoic message feels almost revolutionary. To pause, to breathe, to stay grounded, these are acts of rebellion. To choose calm over reaction is to reclaim agency in a world built on distraction. Imagine walking through a day without rushing to fix or prove anything. Imagine responding instead of reacting. When someone criticizes you, you pause, not to suppress your feelings, but to understand them. You remind yourself that their words belong to them, not to you. This is mastery. It is not about superiority. It is about self-command. Seneca reminded us that true unhappiness comes from never facing adversity, for it denies the chance to prove oneself. Each moment of discomfort becomes an opportunity to fortify the inner self. Though the world remains unpredictable, within us exists a steady observer, a silent, unshakable presence that remains untouched by circumstance and change. This understanding transforms how we live. When stress comes, we meet it with acceptance, not resistance. When fear arises, we examine it rather than flee. When life feels uncertain, we anchor ourselves in the one thing we truly possess, our own reasoned will. The Stoics called this the inner citadel, a fortress of clarity that cannot be shaken by the storms outside. And so we come to a choice. In a world that demands constant movement, will you dare to be still? In a culture obsessed with control, will you choose surrender, not as defeat, but as awareness? Stillness is not passivity. It is power under control. It is the ability to act from intention rather than impulse. The next time anxiety appears, do not fight it or attempt to push it away. Instead, approach it with gentle curiosity, as if it were a teacher guiding you. Ask yourself quietly, what is this feeling trying to reveal? In doing so, you step beyond its control and become an observer rather than a captive. By witnessing it without judgment, insight emerges, allowing you to understand your mind more clearly. From this awareness grows a subtle calm, a grounding presence that softens the intensity of anxious thoughts and creates space for reflection, clarity, and inner steadiness. Marcus Aurelius once reflected that the universe is change, our life is what our thoughts make it. These words remind us that while we cannot halt the currents of time or silence the constant noise around us, we can always choose how we navigate them. Presence, integrity, and thoughtful attention to each action allow us to move through life with steadiness and grace, even when external circumstances remain unpredictable. This prompts a deeper question. Am I living in alignment with my own values, or am I merely reacting to the pressures and events around me? The Stoic path does not begin with grand plans or heroic deeds. It begins with honest self-reflection and the decision to stand firm in the midst of life's turbulence. When we cultivate this inner stillness, it becomes a source of strength. Within that strength, we find true freedom. And from freedom arises the deepest form of peace, one that is resilient, unshakable, and entirely our own. Ultimately, overcoming anxiety does not begin by running away, but by facing life head-on with the composed awareness of a Stoic. True freedom emerges when we stop giving away our peace to circumstances, fears, or the judgments of others. Serenity cannot be taken from us unless we willingly relinquish it. As you navigate the pressures and challenges of daily life, pause to reflect. How often are you reacting impulsively, and how often are you responding with clarity, intention, and presence? The wisdom of Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus reminds us that the power to remain calm, to act virtuously, and to cultivate inner peace always lies within ourselves. Adversity is not an enemy but a teacher, offering opportunities to strengthen resilience and awareness. If this video has offered a fresh perspective, take a moment to subscribe to Stoic Dhamma, leave your thoughts in the comments, and continue exploring the timeless teachings of Stoicism. By integrating these practices into everyday life, we cultivate strength, clarity, and lasting serenity that endure through every challenge and moment.